Part 49. Different Dimension Red Alert World. Author, Sanqian Lang. Chapter 482. This latest type of military unit has appeared less often on previous battlefields and has a weirder appearance. Its overall body is like the big belly of a grasshopper, but it is made of metal. There are two specially processed electromagnetic pulse weapons mounted on it. Some of them look like the weapons of the Coalition's magnetic energy tanks, but upon closer inspection, there are some. The difference is that there is no electric light flashing on it. This kind of weird tank also appeared in a single category. It was divided into two teams, each with 5 tanks, and drove slowly towards the Coalition and Allied forces respectively. Since seeing this kind of tank on the electronic map, Wang Ling is now a little impatient. What the hell is the Seoul Empire doing? Is it using us for experiments, or what? The trip after trip is not over yet. Of course, complaints are complaints. As the captain of the guard, no matter what troubles Yuri's troops make or what troops are mobilized, he has to take them all as ordered. After looking at the electronic map carefully, Wang Ling murmured, "Magnetic tanks. Are even these nasty tanks dispatched this time? When it comes to cooperating with other tanks and dispatching them together, maybe I have to be a little wary, but if you dare to drive towards us like this, aren't you looking for death? Are you looking down on us like that?" During the game, Wang Ling used the Coalition forces to fight against Yuri's troops. It can be said that the most annoying thing is this kind of magneto-electric tank. Of course, the premise is that the different arms of Yuri's army cooperate with each other. If this is the only way, as Wang Ling said, it is just seeking death. After ridiculing, Wang Ling began to make corresponding arrangements. However, this deployment was much simpler than the previous ones. It just moved all the tanks on the front line to the rear, and asked Sun De to continue forward a short distance with the original 40 people, stationed on the road in a swaggering manner. The others stood still. Then, there was nothing more. This time the defense was as simple as that. All that was left was to wait for the magneto-electric tank to approach here. Compared with the previous deployment and mobilization, the actions of the Coalition forces this time were much smaller. After Agent Tanya suffered a big loss in the last round, she did not dare to take a peek at Wang Ling's deployment from the bottom of her heart. During this time, I have been paying attention to all his deployment actions. But seeing this arrangement, he was a little confused. What did he want to do? To be on the safe side, she did not follow suit, but maintained her usual defensive posture, deploying a group of Allied troops on the front line, followed by Grizzly tanks at the rear, Phantom tanks on both sides, and Prism tanks, rocket troopers, etc. at the rear. Strong troops are stationed in a position of force, as if the soldiers are coming to cover up the water and the earth. After the deployment of both sides is completed, all that is left is to wait. The speed of the magneto-electric tank was not too fast. It took more than an hour from the time it appeared to the time it approached the defense lines of both sides. Since Sun De led his troops and rushed out of the defense line for some distance to garrison, naturally they were the first to collide with the magneto-electric tanks on both sides of the defense line, and then quickly started fighting. The functional geometry of this new type of tank is not very clear to the Coalition and Allied forces, and they still have some concerns about it. However, as the two sides fought, everyone watching the battle was shocked, because under the attack of about 40 mobilization soldiers, this kind of magneto-electric tank had no ability or movement to fight back. It was still they were so squishy, and the war started in a very short time, and some people even failed to recover. All 5 magneto-electric tanks were destroyed, and the 5 novice conscripts were promoted to the elite level in vain. This. Are you kidding? What are those tanks in Yuri's army used for? How come they don't have the ability to resist at all? It shouldn't be. I watched battle report videos before. Although there are not many, there have been tanks like this. It seems to use special abilities to destroy buildings. The range is a bit exaggerated, compared with the Prism tank. Got it? So, the new tanks can only deal with buildings, but not infantry tanks. It's possible. Look, new tanks are approaching the Allied defense line. Let's see what happens. In the eastern castle, a group of generals were also surprised, but the battle on the Allied defense line ended too quickly. They were unable to learn more about this new tank, and then turned their attention to the Allied defense line. On the Allied defense line, Agent Tanya was also dumbfounded. The Allied defense was too simple, which made her a little confused. Is this Yuri's new tank so easy to deal with? Without giving her too much time to think, the magneto-electric tanks on the Allied defense line finally approached. However, these 5 new tanks did not break into the fire circle of the Allied soldiers. Instead, they parked far outside, swinging their electromagnetic pulse devices one after another, and each locked onto a Grizzly tank to not lose to the light prism. The tank fired 5 thick purple magnetic waves within range. Then, something happened that shocked all the spectators. The 5 Grizzly tanks were affected by the powerful magnetic waves and flew directly from the ground. The highest distance from the ground was no less than that of a rocket pilot. It's so high that it's a bit exaggerated. During this period, the flying Grizzly tank could only be passively absorbed and moved, while the others were unable to move, not even able to fire, and were completely left to their own devices. And these 5 magnetic energy tanks were also very tricky. They were each outside the bridge. When the 5 adsorbed Grizzly tanks flew over the bridge fence, the magnetic waves suddenly withdrew. Losing the power of the magnetic waves, the 5 Grizzly tanks immediately began a free fall from the air. Within a few seconds, they fell down and hit the fence. The 5 Grizzly tanks exploded one after another. It turns out that this new type of tank is not without attack power, but the attack method is too special, and the attack target is also limited. Wang Ling is familiar with this type of unit, so he can easily destroy it with infantry. At this moment, all the spectators, including the generals in the castle, understood something. Just when these people were surprised, the 5 magneto-electric tanks had already started the next round of adsorption. With the launch of 5 thick magnetic waves, 5 more Grizzly tanks were adsorbed and lifted into the air. Asshole, it's endless, isn't it? Allied soldiers on the front line, come on. Agent Tanya realized it later, but finally reacted at this time, and immediately followed Wang Ling's previous approach, mobilizing the Allied soldiers deployed on the front line and taking the initiative to attack. This approach is really effective. After receiving the order, the dozens of Allied soldiers at the front immediately ended their deployment and rushed towards the 5 magneto-electric tanks outside the bridge. After approaching, they concentrated fire and fired at the 5 magneto-electric tanks. But there was nothing he could do against them, and they were beaten to death one after another. Different Dimension Red Alert World. Author, Sanqian Lang. Chapter 483. As these magneto-electric tanks exploded, the 5 adsorbed Grizzly tanks lost their levitation power and fell straight down from the air. However, fortunately, there was a temporary interruption and there were no other raised obstacles below. The 5 Grizzly tanks fell flatly onto the bridge. Although they were somewhat damaged due to their own weight, they were not too serious. After saving these Grizzly tanks and killing the magneto-electric tanks of Yuri's army, Agent Tanya finally breathed a sigh of relief, and then glanced in the direction of Wang Ling with a complicated expression. If these guard battles were considered a bet between the two sides, there was no doubt that the Allies lost this round again. Of course, this is not the main reason for Agent Tanya's struggle. After all, victory or defeat is a common thing for military strategists. However, in these rounds, she felt that she had lost too much face. When the infantry army of Yuri's troops came, Wang Ling sent a terrorist robot to take the lead in killing the virus snipers in the rear. This gave Agent Tanya a chance to show off her power. Otherwise, knowing the terror of that type of troops, Tanya agents also have to be cautious. Later on, Wang Ling used his terror robot to kill two of the later mind-controlled vehicles, which gave the Allies a lot of help. In the battle just now, although the coalition forces and Wang Ling did not help, in fact Agent Tanya was able to kill the Magneto tank so quickly because of Wang Ling. After seeing what Wang Ling did, she realized that the Magneto tank was weaknesses of electric tanks. Otherwise, just by groping on her own, she doesn't know how many tanks it would take to figure it out. In these games, the Allies not only lost, but also lost with the direct or indirect help of Wang Ling. Agent Tanya, who has always been proud, was inevitably unconvinced, but she was helpless about it. Of course, it wasn't just her. The group of Allied generals in the Eastern Castle also felt a little dull when they recalled this. Of course, these old foxes would not admit it. According to them, this was originally the meeting place designated by the coalition forces. The coalition forces should bear the main responsibility for the security issue. The Allied forces' security was just a formality, so they did not lead the way. The main force arrives. Moreover, the troops of the Seoul Empire were detected at the meeting place designated by the coalition, and they were attacked by Yuri's troops one after another. This in itself was a dereliction of duty by the coalition. Although he successfully defeated Yuri's troops every time, there was always an element of insecurity when being targeted by Yuri's troops. Using this as an excuse, the Allied generals not only refused to admit that they had lost the game, but instead accused the Allied forces of choosing a dangerous meeting location. More than one general requested that the meeting be continued on Allied territory. However, as I said before, once the location is really changed due to the attack of Yuri's troops, the coalition's face will be completely lost. The two sides are criticizing each other on the issue of dominance. The Allies are eager for them to do this or that. Let them comment on the mistakes. Overall, this joint meeting did not go smoothly. Even under the threat of Yuri's troops, a group of generals refused to make any concessions. They even had the attitude of rolling up their sleeves and saying, "It sounds like a big quarrel." The Seoul Empire didn't know what was going on. After the magneto-electric tanks of Yuri's troops were detonated, the next round of attacks didn't come here for a long time. After fighting for so long, the sky was already approaching dawn. Although it is said that due to wars in the Red Alert world, there are often continuous battles without rest for 2 or 3 days, but after all, that consumes too much physical energy and energy. Outside the Eastern Castle, taking advantage of the peace and tranquility of Yuri's troops during this period, Wang Ling also quickly replaced the Wolf team and Fire team with the Dog team and Ice team, taking turns to rest. As for the Allies, Wang Ling also helped them in disguise, sending out a Bear team to replace one of the field teams so that they could have some rest. In this front line, the fighting has slowed down a bit and the guards have to take a rest. However, during this time, the group of generals in the Eastern Castle have become more fiercely fighting. Very unpleasant. We both came together to discuss alliances, not to quarrel. There are all generals of the first generation present, and there are even commanders included. How can it be inappropriate to argue like this in the meeting? Finally, after a long argument, when the two sides even smelled of gunpowder, General William could no longer listen and tried to interrupt. But the coalition forces still didn't buy it. "Okay, if I don't want to quarrel, I won't quarrel. I didn't want to quarrel with you in the first place. As long as you lower your profile and return to the control of our coalition forces after the alliance, everything will be easy to discuss." "Bah! Why should we be controlled by you? How can your coalition forces control our allies? Just your broken radar? Or are you talking about those crude technologies? Allies. Pay attention to the manner in which you speak. Are our attitudes as bad as yours?" It was rare that someone could stop the fight, but he couldn't stop it at all, and the generals of both sides immediately started arguing again. At this point of the quarrel, even PoortoRich felt a little tired. After the two sides continued to argue for a few words, he finally changed his mind and interrupted everyone present. Everyone, let's keep up the quarrel, is not an option. Is there a way? But with your attitude, don't make any noise, okay, General Bob said sarcastically. PoortoRich glared at him, suppressed the anger in his heart, and took a few breaths before suggesting, although all of you here, although they are all generals of the first generation, are all powerful commanders on the front line, representing their respective, there is nothing wrong with the troops talking. But in the quarrel just now, I suddenly realized something. The alliance between the coalition forces and the allied forces is not just a union between our commanders and generals, but a union between two major forces. Such a large scale, what's the point of joining forces and just relying on us to quarrel here? Do we really understand what the lower level troops need? Do we understand what the middle level subordinates care about? Who has personally fought against Yuri's troops? Allied generals. Allied generals. PoortoRich's question, raised at this time and on this occasion, was really tricky. All the generals who had been arguing until their faces turned red and their necks thickened, all turned off and fell silent. Yes, they are indeed a generation of generals who personally command operations, but on weekdays, they are all at the command post, sitting firmly on the Diaotai, and there is a big gap between them and the lower level troops. Although the command is experienced, the soldiers at the bottom do not fully understand what needs and expectations they have for the alliance. The joint plan of both sides relied only on their high-level discussions without the participation of any lower-level or middle-level soldiers. It was incomplete after all. Just look at how fiercely these generals argued with each other. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Different Dimension Red Alert World. Author, Sanqian Lang. Chapter 484. It's rare for your coalition commander to say such pertinent words. After a period of silence, Allied Commander General Bob spoke first and broke the silence. This sentence, if you think about it carefully, is indeed true. Our group of people are just the highest level of the troops on both sides. We are arguing here. It is useless to argue and argue without any results. Since it is a joint effort between the coalition and the allied forces, some lower-level or middle-level soldiers should also be sent to talk about what they mean and listen to them. Let's learn from the ideas comprehensively. In this way, the commanders of both sides finally made a joint decision on this proposal. However, this kind of proposal is not something that the two of them can decide solely. Then PoortoRich looked around and asked, "So, everyone, what do you mean?" "Agree." Seconded. "I agree. We have had enough quarreling until now. We should adopt the opinions of our subordinates." This time, both the coalition and allied generals voted in favor. However, then some allied generals made things difficult. The proposal is good, but what if those soldiers start to quarrel like us? Isn't it still an endless cycle? Hee, you are really interesting. Are you worried? We haven't even arrived yet, and you are worried. Are you afraid of the wolf in front of you and the tiger in the back? Will there be a quarrel? Let's call them in first and try. If we really want to quarrel, just kick him out again. General Luo began to sarcastically, which made the allied general angry and speechless. Now that the proposal has been successfully passed, the next problem arises. A general in the coalition said, "If you want to call subordinate soldiers to come to a meeting, you should carefully select representatives from all levels and comprehensively adopt their opinions. But now, Yuri's troops have obviously noticed us. We don't know when the next wave of attacks will come, so we can't delay this meeting for too long. The selection of representatives for this meeting must be simplified. That's right, the corner of General Bob's mouth curled up, and this sentence seemed to be what he wanted. Because of time, the number of these representatives does not need to be too many, but their identities cannot be really low-level soldiers, otherwise this battle formation is very likely to let. He was speechless. Therefore, our allied forces decided to send Agent Tanya and Zhang Zheng, the leader of the field team, as representatives to attend this meeting. Upon hearing his words, the expressions of several generals from the coalition forces changed instantly. After Wang Ling's obstruction and warning before, they also understood the role of Tanya's agent after entering the Eastern Castle. For them, the coalition generals, it was a huge threat. Take a look at the previous video of Tanya's agent sweeping through the infantry of Yuri's army, and you will know how terrifying this Tanya agent is. Although it is a joint meeting, it will not lead to a real fight, but it is still a deterrent and cannot be ignored. Wang Ling used a tough attitude to keep Agent Tanya outside, disrupting General Bob's plan, but unexpectedly, he took the opportunity to bring Agent Tanya in again. However, although they were angry, they felt like they were dumb and unable to explain the pain of eating Coptis chinensis. After all, this proposal was made by PoortoRich. PoortoRich glanced at General Bob meaningfully. Rarely, he did not reject his plan. Instead, he sneered, "Since your army is planning to send out Agent Tanya, then we must also send out someone who can be equal to Agent Tanya. Only representatives are good. I think Wang Ling is very suitable." This time, it was the turn of the allied generals to change their faces. Indeed, Agent Tanya has great intimidation power and has the power to kill infantry instantly, but is Wang Ling worse? On the contrary, Wang Ling was not only good, but his tough attitude and clear opinions gave them a headache to all the allied generals. Just talking about Agent Tanya, she was about to enter the Oriental Castle as General Bob's personal guard, but she was forcibly stopped by Wang Ling, who even dared to fight against General Bob. Although they had not been in contact with Wang Ling personally for a long time, their impression of Wang Ling was really profound. However, General William immediately asked, "Commander, does this seem inappropriate? Our allied escort is just a formality after all, and you are the main ones responsible for the escort work. Now Yuri's troops have noticed us, and Wang Ling, and as the chief of the guard, if you don't take charge of guard issues but come to the meeting, the impact seems not to be good." "Tch, what a big deal," General Li Wiki then laughed and said, "Look at the previous battles. When did Wang Ling personally take action? When did Wang Ling not rely on his deployment to successfully annihilate Yuri's troops? Since it was just a deployment, it doesn't have to be outside. There are also electronic videos and maps projected in the conference room. Wang Ling can continue to serve as the chief of guard during the meeting, without any delay." "Humph. Your army is really rude. I feel tired for Wang Ling." The allies had nothing to say. Only one 3-star general said something that was neither salty nor cool. "Ha ha ha, no need to worry about it now. It's a matter of time, don't delay anymore, notify them to come in quickly." Outside the Eastern Castle, Wang Ling had already arranged the transfer and rotation of several field groups. Before Yuri's troops started the next round of attack, he planned to take a rest. After all, it was also necessary to continuously observe the battle situation and command operations. A laborious job. However, just as he had this plan, General Li Wiki's voice suddenly came over the radio, "Wang Ling, we all saw the previous guard battle. You did a great job and it gave our coalition forces face." "Yes, General. As the commander of the coalition guard, this is what I should do." When Wang Ling heard this, instead of being surprised, he complained silently. General Li Wiki sent a radio message during the meeting. It must be more than just a reward. There must be other tasks later. However, if he complained, he did not dare to say it openly. Instead, he solemnly performed a military salute and said some words for the occasion. I won't tell you any more. Anyway, your boy has heard too many commendations during this period, so he should have been immune to it long ago. This time I come to you because your boy was honored to be selected as a representative of the coalition forces meeting. As expected, General Lewicki then explained the purpose of his visit, and also informed the general status of the current meeting, focusing on the disputes and stalemates between the two parties. He also vaguely revealed some information to Wang Ling, just to ask him to be sure to accept the meeting. In the following meeting, we sought more benefits for the coalition forces. Different Dimension Red Alert World. Author, Sanqian Lang. Chapter 485. This is what happened. The coalition selected 2 combat force representatives, one of you, and the other is the fire team leader Xia Tian, and they have been handed over to his commander to inform. The meeting location is the Oriental Castle in the large conference room on the 3rd floor. All the generals are here now. Come up with Xia Tian when you are ready, and perform well. Yes, General, I will certainly live up to my trust. As the last sentence was finished, the radio communication finally ended, and Wang Ling changed his dignified appearance before, and complained with a wrinkled face, let me just say, if you send me a message at this time, you will definitely, I have other tasks. It's really hard to take a break. After complaining, this guy thought about it and comforted himself, hey, forget it, the capable ones work harder, so we are not being modest. The stalemate between these generals was more intense than I imagined. This time, let me go, just in time to push forward according to my ideas. Thinking of this, Wang Ling felt much more relaxed. Finally, he told the 2 deputies in the temporary headquarters, Li Tong and Gu Xuanwu, to monitor the electronic map at all times and report immediately if they saw any signs of Yuri's troops. Only then were they prepared and found. In the summer, we entered the Oriental Castle together. This ancient castle is nearly 30 meters high. It highlights the Gothic style from the inside out and looks very grand on the surface. There are only 3 floors in the castle, and each floor is very spacious. There is no elevator, and the upper and lower floors are connected by spiral stairs. As a meeting place, there are naturally a lot of guards in this castle. 2 mobilization soldiers will appear at regular intervals. After seeing Wang Ling and Yan Tian, they will solemnly perform a military salute. Wang Ling nodded every time and did not return the greetings one by one. When he came to the bottom of the stairs, he raised his head and looked up, and then walked up slowly with Yan Tian. During this process, Xia Tian seemed to be a little unsure, and asked quietly, Brother Wang Ling, you said, the generals are arguing fiercely for this joint meeting, so how useful is it to send us here? Could it be that we are here? Can the opinions of a group of generals be determined? Moreover, all the senior generals of the coalition and allied forces will be present. It is normal to find representatives of the troops, but they only found the 2 of us. Isn't this too much pressure? Really? With our help, can we promote the alliance between the 2 armies? Wang Ling smiled and said with relief, it is inevitable that there will be pressure. After all, they are a group of veterans. They have to think carefully about what they say and are a bit cautious. However, don't underestimate our role. The generals are in high positions. But they also have to refer to our needs and opinions in the alliance, because they are responsible for command, and we are responsible for charging on the front line. This is true, Xia Tian also felt the same way. Then, Wang Ling's demeanor changed, and he had a sense of giving guidance to the country. When it comes to promoting the alliance, sending others here really doesn't have much effect. It's just to provide some opinions, and then follow the general's orders. From now on, those who should argue will still argue. But it will be different with me, I can truly promote the unity of the 2 armies. Oh? Okay. Haha, Brother Wang Ling, what I admire most is your confidence. Strong and confident, cunning and reliable, this is what a man is. Not only did Xian Tian not resent Wang Ling's tone, but as if appreciating it very much. The conversation between the two was very short. After a few simple words, they fell silent and went up the stairs to the third floor. Each floor of this oriental castle is very spacious, and the third floor is a large hall, which seems to be used for cocktail parties or other large-scale ceremonies in peacetime. The location of the joint meeting is in the conspicuous large conference room at the back of the hall. Walking to the door of the conference room, Wang Ling and Yan Tian stood dignified and reported, "Report, coalition guards, Wang Ling, Yan Tian, come to report. Enter." There was a sound in the conference room. After hearing it, the two of them opened the door and walked in. This large conference room is also very spacious, with an oversized oval conference table in the center, and the generals of the coalition and allied forces are lined up on both sides, sitting dignifiedly. As for the allies, Tanya and an elite allied soldier were already sitting in the seats at the end. These two people are also representatives of the allied combat forces. They are not mainly responsible for security issues. They have relatively few things to arrange, so they naturally took the lead. After Wang Ling and his two men arrived, many generals of the coalition forces present heaved a sigh of relief. The arrival of Agent Tanya had put a lot of pressure on them, but the arrival of Wang Ling neutralized this pressure, which in turn caused many generals from the allied forces to frown slightly, as if they were disapproving of Wang Ling. Ling is not very cold. After arriving at the scene, the two gave a neat military salute, and then sat down at the end of the allied force. Ahem. At this time, PoortoRich coughed twice and spoke, "Now that all representatives of the combat forces of both sides are in place, let's start our joint meeting again. Tanya, Zhang, also, Wang Ling, Yan Tian, you guys, tell me, what are the troops below looking forward to most about the alliance between the two sides?" The problem came, but no one spoke, no matter Wang Ling, Yan Tian, Tanya, or Zhang, they all remained silent in a tacit understanding. At this time, General William saw the clues and dispelled their worries. "Don't worry too much. This joint meeting is of great importance, so speak freely and say everything you really want to say. No one will care about it making things difficult for you." What he said really hit the point. Agents Wang Ling and Tanya finally seemed more relaxed after hearing this. However, Yan Tian and Zhang from the allied forces were still cautious, facing the table. Senior generals are under a lot of psychological pressure. Wang Ling glanced at Agent Tanya and made a please gesture in a very gentlemanly manner, asking her to express her opinion first. Agent Tanya was not humble to Wang Ling. After glancing at him, she cleared her throat and spoke naturally. "The goal of the two armies joining forces is to fight against the Mind Empire. Through the Mind Empire's raid before, we see that the Empire of the Heart is not as powerful as we imagined, but the various tricky military units are very difficult to deal with. It is difficult for our troops to fight alone. And to unite, of course we need to let the soldiers at the bottom truly integrate and learn from their strengths to offset their weaknesses. Can gain the ability to resist the empire of the soul." Well, this statement is very true, but we have already thought about this issue before, but after integrating with each other, we had a lot of disputes over how to unify the command. Different Dimension Red Alert World. Author, Sanqian Lang. Chapter 486. A general present responded. Agent Tanya's statement was actually the same as the perspective that these generals had considered beforehand. The two sides joined forces with each other to gather their forces together and coordinate their deployment. However, the group of generals fought fiercely over which side would take the lead, and no one was willing to give in. After hearing this, Agent Tanya's originally rather proud face suddenly showed an embarrassed look. The other generals are all pretty smart too. You can't tell. Although Agent Tanya is considered a combat force here, As an allied hero-level unit and with a very high status within the allied forces, she still has some differences with those lower-level troops. Estrangement, in this kind of matter, failed to play a representative role at all, so they all frowned. Among them, General Bob's face was particularly ugly. He hurriedly recommended Agent Tanya. To put it bluntly, he had the idea of recruiting Agent Tanya to intimidate the coalition generals. However, he did not expect that because of Wang Ling's existence, not only did the deterrence fail. Well, Agent Tanya herself couldn't make any pertinent suggestions. As for Zhang Zhang, he is sitting upright now, feeling quite nervous and under a lot of pressure. Just like Xia Tian, he can't hope for anything like this at all. Even Coach Rich didn't look too good. This was his suggestion. Could it be that this group of combat troops couldn't be counted on in the meeting? Ahem. Just when the atmosphere was dull and depressing, Wang Ling suddenly coughed and said sarcastically, "Tanya, have you never experienced fighting as a soldier from the bottom? Or are you used to being pampered these days? Only retaining basic combat effectiveness and decoupling from the bottom. TCH. You are awesome, tell me." Agent Tanya was not convinced and kicked the ball directly to Wang Ling. When the other generals heard this, they all looked at Wang Ling, with some hope and doubt in their eyes. Wang Ling had boasted about Haikao to Yan Tian on the stairs earlier, so he naturally had his own plans. There was no way to be polite in this situation. He glanced around at the generals present and said unhurriedly, "Soldiers. What do you look forward to most?" This question is actually too simple, even a bit extravagant. Because almost most soldiers look forward to two words, peace. Wang Ling's words were a bit off the mark. When the generals heard this, they were all confused. General Bob stared at Wang Ling and asked, "What do you mean by this? Don't be impatient." Wang Ling pressed his hand, and a group of generals suddenly fell silent at the signal of one of his senior colonels. At this time, Wang Lingke slowly explained, "When I say this, I am not exaggerating at all. Yes, we are soldiers, but we are also flesh and blood, alive, thinking and feeling. Let me ask, a normal person, who would do you like war? War, regardless of victory or defeat, will be accompanied by sacrifices. Those comrades who have been together day and night suddenly died in front of themselves. Who would like that feeling? The war started, and its impact was far-reaching. The intertwining of blood and fire, sacrifice accompanied by parting, aren't these scenes of human tragedy?" This statement is not that Wang Ling is being hypocritical. In fact, he has been thinking about this issue since he learned about the duality of the different dimensional system. Although this is a game world, everything here is too real. Moreover, if you die in the game, you will also die in reality. How different is this from real war? Today, taking this opportunity to speak freely, Wang Ling finally expressed this idea without any scruples. Even if we don't like war, we are still soldiers, loyal to our own army, fighting for hegemony. I've been playing for too long, and to be honest, I'm very tired from playing. Snort. Seeing that Wang Ling was leading the way, General Bob couldn't stand listening anymore and interrupted, "Are you protesting against us for this war of hegemony by saying this now? No matter how powerful Wang Ling is, you can't take turns. Why don't you protest here? To put it bluntly, you are just a senior colonel and your qualifications are not enough. Good guy, this opening is filled with the smell of gunpowder." To be honest, this was actually General Bob deliberately trying to embarrass Wang Ling, who made Wang Ling disrupt his plan several times. When Coach Rich heard this, his tone was not very kind. "General Bob, I have said before that if you speak freely, no one will make things difficult for you." "What do you mean?" "Humph." General Bob crossed his arms. Knowing that he was in the wrong, he simply snorted and stopped talking. Coach Rich turned to Wang Ling and said, "Wang Ling, you too, it's not the right time to talk about the meaning of the war for hegemony. What we are facing now is the empire of the soul. It's not like you don't know the ambitions of this empire. This battle must be fought. Everyone wants peace, but now, we have to fight this battle. I know, coach, don't worry, I haven't finished speaking yet. Now that the words have been spoken, Wang Ling no longer has any scruples. After stopping PoortoRich, the guy continued, the Alliance and the Allies came to fight for hegemony, but it was also because of this fight for hegemony that the relationship between the two sides, the hatred is deep and no one is willing to admit defeat. The generals can argue for the right to dominate the command. It will be even more difficult for the soldiers below to forcibly merge or to be unified under the command of another force. Therefore, this method is temporarily here. It doesn't work. Finally, coming to the key point, all the generals cheered up and listened carefully, while General Bob took the initiative to ask, "Doesn't it work? Then tell me, how can it work?" Wang Ling smiled confidently, "My idea is also very simple. Each of them commands his own troops. There is no need to unify the command authority." What's the difference between saying this suggestion and not saying it? Are you here to cause trouble? After hearing this, the generals finally lost their composure and began to question one after another. Agent Tanya cast a questioning look at Wang Ling, and Yan Tian sitting next to him also had a little cold sweat on his temples. Even General Li Wiki asked. He asked, but how different is it from not being united if each of them commands his own troops? Is it just an exchange of information and communication with senior officials? Faced with the general's doubts, Wang Ling acted very indifferently, continued to interrupt them, and explained, "Generals, don't worry. Of course, this alliance must be joint, but what I said is we just need to change a joint approach. Normally, we need to command our own troops separately, but on some major decisions, the generals need to discuss and vote together, which is equivalent to establishing a high-level management organization, but the implementation of specific tasks is still the commanders of the respective troops are executing it. At best, some isolated troops will temporarily fall under the command of the other party when they enter the other party's territory. This is fine. This method is acceptable and we won't end up arguing over unified command authority. This suggestion is quite pertinent." After changing their way of thinking and forming a coalition, as soon as the proposal came out, the expressions of these generals finally softened a little. However, Wang Ling did not give up yet. After this proposal, he said, "Of course, our alliance is to fight against the empire of mind. The technology of each other's arms also needs to learn from each other's strengths. Under the premise of being commanded by our own generals, the troops of both sides can still a further joint method is needed, and that is the exchange of military technology. Recently, the internet has been very unstable, and book friends who often go to vblog may also be paying attention to some things. However, on the current internet, it is difficult to distinguish between true and false, false and true, so all book friends must remain rational when paying attention, and do not be led by others. To be honest, as an online writer, under all kinds of one-size-fits-all and annoying bans, it is inevitable that there is a backlog of negative energy in my heart, with nowhere to vent it. But, to put it bluntly, I am just an ordinary person, and I am not outstanding among online writers. I even have to rely on full attendance on the platform to make a living, so there are many things I cannot say, and I dare not say them, and I feel very angry. However, in times of disaster, perhaps many forces are looking forward to us being in chaos, and the more times this happens, the less likely we are to be in chaos. The disaster will eventually pass, and patriotism must be rational. Pray for the disaster area, come on, my country. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Different Dimension Red Alert World. Author, Sanqian Lang. Chapter 487. Finally, Wang Ling found the right occasion to express his thoughts. In fact, to put it bluntly, Wang Ling originally proposed to unite the Allied forces. In addition to the oppression of the Seoul Empire and wartime needs, there were also many factors that he considered from his personal perspective. Now, whether it is mobilization troops, magnetic blast infantry, or even anti-aircraft infantry, these three convertible coalition arms, Wang Ling has been promoted to the top level, and new arms are needed to continue. This new direction, naturally, it pointed to the Allies. What's more, the Allied forces do indeed have the type of troops that Wang Ling has longed for. But now that the alliance between the two armies was in a stalemate, he naturally followed the trend and promoted the alliance while also trying his best to obtain the troops he desired. Military technology exchange. Are you kidding? Weapon technology, but the symbols of both our forces are secrets. Can such secrets be exchanged? Yes, this is a bit nonsense. I don't agree with exchanging the military technology we have worked so hard to research. What's there to disagree with? I think it's fine. Yeah, it's not a free gift, it's an exchange. Our military technology is a secret, and so is the other parties. Since we are going to join forces, it is logical to exchange these technologies. It makes no sense. Such secrets can be exchanged. Have we reached that point in our union? Why do we trust them so quickly? When the generals present heard the statement, they were all shocked, and then they started arguing fiercely. Some agreed and some protested. The scene became quite lively for a while. Tanya, Yan Tian, and Zhang Zheng were not qualified to participate in this kind of debate, but now they all looked at Wang Ling in surprise, not expecting that he could make such a bold proposal. However, the current debate was within Wang Ling's expectation. It can be said that most of these senior generals are diehards. Under normal circumstances, few would be willing to exchange their own military technology. After the generals at the scene argued for a while, Wang Ling coughed dryly, interrupted the argument, and began to persuade, "Generals, our alliance is not just a high-level alliance. Even if we can temporarily command part of the opponent's troops, we can use two conflicts between the two armies will inevitably lead to various frictions, which is not conducive to combat. As I said before, it is very difficult in a short time to force the combat forces of the two armies to integrate. This will inevitably require a long running-in period. And the two armies to join forces, both of us must have our own needs. Before we can get along, we might as well select some of the other's army's military technologies and exchange them with equal value for our own. This is how the two armies can quickly increase their combat effectiveness after joining forces." In order to legitimately obtain the Allied military technology, Wang Ling also took great pains. Of course, what he said is in line with the current situation. The coalition forces and the Allied forces really need to exchange some military technology. Humph, you have a beautiful idea. However, General Bob did not buy it, and even sneered, "You said it so righteously, I think you just want to steal the technology of our Allied forces. With your crude primitive technology, why should you compare it with our technology?" Compared. His words could be said to be very rude and blatantly sarcastic to the entire coalition army, which made all the coalition generals furious. Even PoortoRich was a little angry, but he suppressed his anger and provoked the Allies' pain. Ahem. "General Bob, I don't like hearing this. The Allied forces' technology is a crazy pursuit. Wild, full of firepower, but why are you called a crude primitive technology? I think you are also a noble person and forget things. Have you forgotten that before Yuri rebelled, we relied on these crude primitive technologies, almost completely defeating the main Allied force?" Snort. General Bob spoke harshly and was unabashedly sarcastic, while PoortoRich was also tit for tat here. He didn't mention any pot, and for a while he made the Allied generals blow their beards and stare with anger. However, General Bob should have been furious after hearing this obvious sarcasm, but in fact, the Allied commander was very abnormal. He was indeed annoyed for a while after hearing this, but then he seemed to think of something. His eyes lit up and he showed a sly smile. "Okay. PoortoRich, this is what you said. Is it a technology swap between arms? That's it? General, do you really agree?" An Allied general was immediately shocked and seemed to want to persuade him to give up this idea, but General Bob glared at him and blocked his next words. Not only the Allied forces, but also the coalition forces were a little shocked. Why did this old fox change his attitude so quickly? Looking at his expression, it seems like there is some conspiracy. Is this reliable? With this question, many generals looked to PoortoRich and asked him to make up his mind. PoortoRich did not object in the end. "Okay. Now that this proposal has been approved, let's talk about the specific military technology exchanges. Of course we need to discuss it, but it's not appropriate to say it directly. In my opinion, we should list the technologies of each other's arms that we value, and jointly select some that can be exchanged at this time." Wang Ling suddenly came in and developed an ingenious way of exchange. "It's just what I want. Let me be the representative of the Allies this time." General Bob obviously had a plan and agreed immediately. Wang Ling didn't care, and instead recommended himself. "Coach, I made the suggestion, so how about I be the representative of the coalition?" "Wang Ling, there are so many generals, how can you be the representative? Stop messing around." General Li Wiki glared at him, but PoortoRich waved his hand. "It's okay, Wang Ling can make such suggestions. He is an extraordinary person, I think he is qualified enough to represent the coalition, let him make the selection." "Yes, coach," Wang Lingling said happily. Later, the guards brought 2 panels and handed them to Wang Ling and General Bob respectively. They listed the arms and technologies of the Allied and coalition forces respectively, and asked the other party to select and list them, and then discuss them. After receiving the panel, Wang Ling got busy seriously. General Bob also looked at Wang Ling with a sinister smile and lowered his head to select. During this process, Agent Tanya's face was filled with helplessness and unwillingness. As a heroic unit of the Allied forces, she could not help at all in this kind of joint meeting. Instead, Wang Ling, a sworn enemy, stepped in. How could she be content with stealing the limelight? However, she just had nothing to say about it. After the selection lasted for a while, the 2 sides finally finished their work, and then the guards exchanged the panels with each other. After getting the opponent's panel, Wang Ling glanced at it. At this glance, he couldn't help but raise his eyebrows. Because the military technologies selected by General Bob, an old fox, are all the killer weapons of the coalition forces: Kirov airships, apocalyptic tanks, self-destruction trucks, terrorist robots, and radiation engineers. Guess what types of troops Wang Ling Hui picked? Different Dimension Red Alert World. Author, Sanqian Lang. Chapter 488. Although the number selected is not large, these are all heavyweight military technologies of the coalition. No wonder General Bob had such a successful expression before, his feelings were aimed at these big guys. Seeing Wang Ling's expression, the other coalition generals were also curious and wanted to pass the panel. After this inspection, many generals frowned and even snorted grumpily, without any concealment. General Bob was dissatisfied with this approach. However, Wang Ling was not angry or even surprised. Instead, he showed a playful smile and looked at General Bob and the others. As for General Bob, he took over the panel and glanced at it, but he suddenly became furious, slammed the round table, and roared, "Wang Ling! I have never seen such a shameless person like you. Do you want to, when it comes to annexing the Allied forces, just tell me, why are you doing so much trouble? Huh? What's wrong, General. His anger confused everyone present except Wang Ling. Some allied generals who were close to General Bob hurriedly asked for the panel. However, in the end, they were just like General Bob. After just a glance, they became angry and roared. Wang Ling! You have gone too far. Are you here to cause trouble or are you here to show off your skills? What you chose is just a slap in our face. Wang Ling, do you really think that with the coalition forces protecting you, you can do whatever you want? This group of generals seemed to have contracted an infectious disease. Everyone who saw the panel roared. Finally, the panel was sent to Agent Tanya and Zhang Zheng. As a result, Zhang Zheng was choked and coughed repeatedly. Agent Tanya even directly attacked, I really saw you right, your face is really unrivaled. Seeing the reaction of the Allied forces with their own eyes, the Allied generals who were still a little annoyed looked at each other one by one, and were even more curious about what kind of Allied military technology Wang Ling pointed out on the panel. They were all so angry that they became like this. Out of curiosity, Yan Tian was ordered to take over the panel and hand it over to the coalition generals. During the handover process, Xia Tian glanced at it intentionally or unintentionally, and his expression became very exciting on the spot. After other generals saw it, they were also dumbfounded. Some radicals couldn't even hold back their laughter, and they were so gloating about the misfortune. I saw that on the panel, the following arms were pointed out in detail. Prism tank, Phantom tank, Grizzly tank, multi-purpose infantry vehicle, tank killer, Black Hawk fighter, intruder fighter, transport helicopter, chrono mining vehicle, rocket pilot, chrono legionnaire, SEAL force, sniper, spies, allied soldiers, aircraft carriers, dolphins, destroyers, Aegis cruisers. That's a densely packed area. General Bob had some agenda before and unceremoniously listed the major weapons of the coalition, which had already made the coalition generals unhappy. But, what about Wang Ling? This guy actually listed all the infantry arms, tank arms, and even Air Force arms and naval arms that the Allied forces did not have. In such a situation, who wouldn't be angry if someone blamed it? The exchange of military technology is originally for the two armies to better combine and learn from each other's strengths to enhance strength and fight against the spiritual empire. But you list them all, what do you mean? Tank killer, Black Hawk fighter, sniper. These are the unique units of some forces within the Allied forces. They are not even available for other Allied forces outside that force. Do you still want them? Intruder fighter jet? Do you have an air command and just want to play fighter jets? Not even the Grizzly tank? Isn't your Rhino tank stronger than the Grizzly tank? What's even more annoying is that even the Allied soldiers were listed. What does this mean? Take the heat out of the cauldron. Even the Navy has been listed in the same category. Are you ordering troops? You point out all the technology exchanges between arms. Is this something human beings do? Almost all the people present are general-level people. You, a senior colonel, are you showing off here? No wonder General Bob said that Wang Ling wanted to annex the Allies and hand over all these military technologies. So, do the Allies still have any secrets about their military technologies? A generation of Allied commanders, as cunning as an old fox, said they had never seen such a shameless person. This shows how desperate Wang Ling was in what he did. Even the generals on the coalition side couldn't help but want to beat them up if the same thing happened to them. The atmosphere at the scene was originally good and moving in the direction of unity, but as soon as Wang Ling's panel came out, the atmosphere in the entire conference room became subtle, a little tense, and even a little funny. However, if you say he is thick-skinned, he is really thick-skinned. Just when the generals had different expressions, Wang Ling coughed dryly and defended, "Generals, why are you angry? I ordered it. There are so many, doesn't this prove that the technology of the Allied forces is attractive? I can't help but think about it. Pooh. Go away, you. False reasoning and sophistry. Your skin is thicker than the city wall. Dot. Many Allied generals didn't even care about their status, and started to curse with beards and eyes. The coalition generals looked at each other and wanted to laugh, but in this atmosphere they had to hold it in. It was quite uncomfortable, and embarrassing. After these generals had almost scolded each other, General Bob slammed the table and roared, "Don't think you can get the technology of these arms if you order more, it's just nonsense." Oh, Wang Ling responded expressionlessly. In fact, he didn't expect to get so many military technologies in exchange, and he wouldn't need so much. The more you click, the easier the subsequent negotiations will be and the wider your choices will be, right? You. Humph. But his neither salty nor bland response really made General Bob so angry that he almost blushed and felt thick-necked. As a senior colonel, in the end he was so angry that many of the Allied high-ranking officials were furious, and the Allied commander was so angry that his face turned red. If this was spread, it would really be enough for Wang Ling to brag in front of everyone for a lifetime. Seeing that this negotiation was going to be distorted by Wang Ling again, PoortoRich finally had to speak at this time. "General Bob, and all the generals of the Allied forces, calm down, calm down. Wang Ling's choice in this matter is indeed it's a bit too much, and we all have to admit this. However, you should know that this is not the technology of the arms that will eventually be exchanged. Don't be so angry now, right?" Even though he was trying his best to put out the fire, the Allies were still furious. "It's true that it hasn't been finalized, but he's pointing out troops in front of us. Isn't this insulting us?" "Ahem, General Bob, what you are saying is a bit alarmist." "What is an insult? Wang Ling did order too many noble military units, but General Bob, does what you order fully meet the requirements?" Different Dimension Red Alert World. Author, Sanqian Lang. Chapter 489. His own general was protecting his own soldiers. Wang Ling pointed out all the Allied troops to be exchanged on the panel, which angered the Allied generals. However, PoortoRich did not say a word to blame him. After making a symbolic statement, as soon as he turned his face, the fire was burned on the Allies. Kirov airships and Apocalypse tanks, these two arms are the biggest killers of our coalition forces. Terrorist robots are a major feature of our coalition forces, and self-destruction trucks and radiation engineers are also the weapons of some of our forces. Exclusive military units, General Bob lists all these units in one breath. Doesn't he have a small appetite? Humph. Don't forget, this is what you are talking about, the exchange of technology between arms. Of course I want to point out the arms of your army that I value most. General Bob refused to admit it. Wang Ling also grasped this point and continued to act rogue. "That's right, General, I also named the arms I'm optimistic about." "There are too many types of troops that you are optimistic about," an Allied general immediately reprimanded. Wang Ling, on the other hand, looked harmless. "Wouldn't it be better to have more? It just shows that your army's branches are technologically advanced, which makes people covetous." Roll. "You little brat, can you be any thicker-skinned? You have such a huge appetite, I'm afraid you'll die from exhaustion." Dot. Well, while we were talking, we were back to the original point. Wang Ling's words made these Allied generals blow their beards and stare with anger. This is interesting to talk about. PoortoRich had previously proposed that his soldiers come to the meeting as representatives. The Allied forces had generals' concerns and stopped quarreling with each other like them. However, the development of this matter was beyond their expectations. Wang Ling, Yan Tian, Tanya, and Zhang Zheng did come as representatives, but they did not quarrel among themselves. Instead, Wang Ling one man made all the Allied generals' livers ache with anger. If they had known the result in advance, They might have rather argued with the coalition generals for a while longer than to let Wang Ling set foot in this conference room. There is no one like Wang Ling who can make a group of generals hold such a grudge. However, Wang Ling had already arrived and pushed the meeting to such an extent that it was too late for them to regret it. After being annoyed for a while, PoortoRich put out the fire. "Why are you arguing again? General Bob, you are all senior generals of the generation, why are you so serious with a senior colonel? Can you not be more serious? Although he is a senior colonel, he is more irritating than you generals, and he represents your coalition forces," an allied general replied with a very unkind tone. Ahem. PoortoRich suppressed the smile in his heart, pretended to cough twice, adjusted his mentality, and then persuaded, "Everyone, calm down, we are having a meeting to discuss, not a quarrel. Wang Ling, Agent Tanya and the others were called here to break the deadlock, not to cause trouble. Now that Wang Ling has given the suggestion, you and I have both agreed that the exchange of military technology can be said to be of great value, but the specifics should be there are quite a lot of differences in terms of which military technology should be used in exchange for this. Compared with the previous deadlock, this is already an improvement. Yes, at least the meeting progressed smoothly. Although Wang Ling's pointing out troops made people angry, I have to say that he really put forward some valuable suggestions. Within the Allied forces, General William was relatively calm. After PoortoRich's persuasion, he took 2 deep breaths to suppress his anger. After looking at the overall situation, he made a suggestion. It is indeed imperative to exchange technology between arms, but after all, it involves we cannot make hasty decisions when it comes to sensitive technologies for both of us. This meeting has taken too long and everyone is tired. In my opinion, we should suspend the meeting for 2 hours, take a short break, and then discuss it separately. What kind of military technology can you give in exchange for equal exchange? Okay, don't say it or feel it. This reminder is really true. Because of the attack by Yuri's troops, this meeting lasted almost a day and a night without any rest. My brain was a little slow. It's time to take a break. PoortoRich stretched as he spoke, while other generals, whether they were coalition forces or allies, all nodded in agreement. Note, these generals also had special rooms to rest on the nights of the previous few days of meetings, so the meetings of the previous few days were not included in this meeting. Time is not forgiving. Although they have high positions and powerful positions, these generals are also older. They have been staying up late to discuss, and they can't stand it any longer, so they simply took the opportunity to go down the slope. After all the generals agreed, General William took back the panel where Wang Ling had ordered troops and said with a smile, "Of course, our 2 armies are uniting. This is an epoch-making meeting. The exchange of technology between arms will naturally be necessary. Show your sincerity. I hope to be able to exchange at least one of the 2 powerful arms of your army, the aerial death god and the apocalypse tank, and we will also select arm technologies of equal value from the panel for exchange." There is something in his words. Picked from a panel? On that panel, Wang Ling had almost all the allied troops. They could pick out some irrelevant troops that did not pose much of a threat to them and add them together in exchange for the Allied forces' big killer weapon. Zhang is still old and hot. Wang Ling specially selected so many because he wanted to have enough choice. However, he did not expect General William's statement and instead gave the choice to the Allies. The situation was somewhat unfavorable to the Allies. Everyone present, who is not an old fox, realized what he meant almost immediately. The Allied generals turned their anger into joy and agreed with smiles, while the faces of the Allied generals were a little ugly. However, he is the old leader after all. After some thought, PoortoRich also suggested, "Of course, that's very good. However, although Wang Ling is a representative of the coalition, he is not the highest level of the coalition after all. The things he pointed out, there are many types of arms that we are not in urgent need of, So after your army selects a series of arms, we should also have the right to further select them. Good guy. One sentence disrupted General Williams' calculations, causing the Allied generals to immediately grimace, while the Allied forces softened somewhat. Okay. That's it. At this time, General Bob also spoke. The two sides had reached this point, and they had found each other's balance. This was not easy. The Empire of Mind doesn't know how many Yuri troops have noticed this place. Our rest and discussion time cannot be too long. 2 hours is not short. Then, we will gather here in 2 hours and break up. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Different Dimension Red Alert World. Author, Sanqian Lang. Chapter 490. Wang Ling, you almost scared me to death, you know. I was already very hot-tempered, but now I know that compared with you, I am totally inferior. Good guy, there are all the Allied forces on the opposite side. General, most people, even me, are nervous in front of so many generals. But you are not nervous. Instead, you talk eloquently. You can make suggestions on issues that are a headache for the generals of both armies. What's even more scary is that you actually how dare you show off in front of a group of Allied generals. Yan Tian and Wang Ling entered the Eastern Castle together as representatives of the coalition forces, so the rest rooms were naturally arranged in the same room. After the meeting, the two of them had just returned to the room when Xia Tian looked like he had been beaten to death. He grabbed Wang Ling and started talking, haha, but what you said is really cool. Look at those Allied generals. I was so angry at that time, that face was so beautiful, red and green, it was so refreshing to see. Although I didn't help much in this meeting, coming with you and witnessing the scene with my own eyes was enough for me. Those little bastards under my command are so boastful. Ha ha ha. Wang Ling pointed out so many technologies of the Allied armies, and indeed he had some thoughts of trying to mislead the Allies, but more of it came down to the right of choice. However, in the eyes of others, this guy is just deliberately teasing the Allies and deliberately showing off, and Xia Tian is no exception. After hearing what Xia Tian said, Wang Ling twitched the corner of his mouth, feeling particularly embarrassed. After the embarrassment, he glanced at Xia Tian again and complained, "Come on, don't think about bragging now. I gave you the suggestion, but what can you get in exchange for this military technology exchange? We still don't know what we will hand over, so don't get too happy too early." Haha, okay, I know. But brother Wang Ling, I have some blind confidence in you now. With you making suggestions, I believe the Allies will definitely suffer a huge loss this time. Stop flattering me. I only have 1 hour to rest. Take a rest now. Xia Tian was a little too excited, but Wang Ling was not very relaxed here. After commanding defensive operations one after another, and then being called to the Eastern Castle for a meeting with these generals, although Wang Ling acted naturally and even with ease, in fact he was also under pressure. Although the time for rest in the Red Alert world is limited, only 1 hour, and then there will be a special meeting within the coalition, but Wang Ling is a player, and he does not have to stick to the Red Alert world. He contacted the gangster just after lying on the bed. "Uncle, back to the real world. The next meeting will involve exchangeable arms." This is something Wang Ling is very concerned about. Of course, he must be energetic enough to negotiate. After a night of silence, Wang Ling woke up the next morning and went to practice as usual. After breakfast, he went back to the dormitory and played with Xiao He for a long time. Then he suddenly remembered something and quickly turned on the computer and searched for the detailed arms and various types of Yuri's troops. Science and technology. It is true that Wang Ling often played this game before, but since the introduction of the different dimensional system, he can directly enter the world of Red Alert to experience it personally. Naturally, he rarely touches this game again in real life. As time goes by, Chang, for fear that he might forget something, so he should review it in advance before entering the world of Red Alert. Until the evening, Wang Ling had some dinner in advance, then touched Xiao Hei's dog's head, lying on the bed and entering the world of Red Alert again. It took a whole day of rest in the real world, but in the Red Alert world, time did not pass at all. It still stopped at the moment when Wang Ling exited the Red Alert world. However, Wang Ling did not get up because he had a rare 1-hour break. He took advantage of this time to relax as much as possible. After lying down for another half an hour, Wang Ling sat up and compiled an electronic version of Yuri's military units and various technologies in the Red Alert world. After finishing their work, an hour's rest time was spent. Xia Tian woke up on time, or he didn't sleep at all. After sorting themselves out, the two went directly to the small conference room on the second floor. Met with the generals of the coalition forces. An hour's rest time is still not enough. I really want to sleep with him until he is in total darkness. At this time, the group of coalition generals also came to the small conference room one after another. Some generals couldn't help but yawned, but then they were laughed at by other generals. Shame on you, look at Wang Ling and Yan Tian, they are young. People are so energetic, but you old guy is still complaining about being tired. What are you talking about? Just because they are young, isn't it normal for them to survive longer than us? What an excuse. Haha, Wang Ling, you did a good job with your proposal this time, especially the part about calling troops. When I saw the faces of those old foxes from the Allied forces, I found it funny. I had been thinking about this just now, and I almost didn't even dream about it. Wake up with a smile. General. Wang Ling and Yan Tian were not qualified to participate in the jokes among these generals. Seeing that the topic was brought to themselves, they quickly and solemnly performed a military salute. After greetings, the group took their seats. However, before the discussion had even begun, news suddenly came from Wang Ling's radio. Team leader, Yuri's troops have been discovered. Huh? Yuri troops appear at this time. Wang Ling was slightly dissatisfied. At the same time, there were guards in the small conference room reporting the news. Many generals also got the news and quickly opened their portable electronic maps. The electronic map showed that at the other end of the holy city, outside the unexplored area, a group of purple light spots appeared. When you look closer, you can see that they are 15 or 16 flying saucers. These flying saucers arrived late, and they did not maintain the same good formation as the Yuri troops that attacked before. All 15 or 6 ships were gathered together, and they did not target the defense lines of the coalition and allied forces. Instead, they were far away in the central area of the two defense lines. Rushed over. According to the current deployment, if this group of flying saucers really flies in, they will happen to be able to avoid the front-line defense forces of the two armies, fly across the river, and reach the eastern castle area. It's this kind of flying saucer. I've seen previous combat videos. This kind of flying saucer is very difficult to deal with. I didn't expect that Yuri's troops would even use flying saucers this time. Really, the most difficult flying saucer was dispatched at the critical moment of the meeting. Should the meeting be postponed or suspended? These generals were obviously deeply impressed by this kind of flying saucer and were very afraid of it. However, Wang Ling smiled casually. Laser UFO, if a single type of military unit appears, it won't be much trouble. Just concentrate on air defense forces to defeat it. Wang Ling then issued an order to Li Tong and Gu Suanwu via radio in front of these generals, and drove a group of anti-aircraft crawlers out of the eastern castle area, across the bridge, and deployed in the center of the two armies. Okay, that's it? Chiefs, can our meeting begin? Different Dimension Red Alert World. Author, Sanqian Lang. Chapter 491. That's right, in the eyes of those generals, the flying saucers, which were the laser UFOs that Wang Ling called, were very difficult to deal with. Wang Ling just deployed a group of anti-aircraft crawlers to the center of the two armies on the other side of the river, and then ignored them. Wang Ling, is this okay? However, the other generals were still a little worried. Is that kind of flying saucer called a laser UFO? We've seen it in the video. It's very difficult to deal with. Can it be stopped with just those anti-aircraft vehicles? Yeah, just to be on the safe side, let's send in more troops. After all, this is no joke. Faced with the concerns of these generals, Wang Ling was very indifferent. He smiled and said comfortingly, "Don't worry, chiefs, aren't anti-aircraft vehicles used to target air targets? If it were an Allied multifunctional infantry vehicle, it is really possible for these laser UFOs to break through, but our anti-aircraft crawler vehicles are different. The rate of fire is much faster, and they still cause splash damage. These laser UFOs will die as many as they come, so it is impossible to break through. Yes, there is no need to send additional troops." Seeing Wang Ling's confident look, a group of generals glanced at each other. They would inevitably have some doubts, but they felt much more at ease in their hearts. Some generals even lamented that the post of captain of the guard had been handed over to him. Give it to Wang Ling, that's right. Well, since Wang Ling said there is no problem, let's give him some trust and let the guards closely monitor the movements of those flying saucers, and then let's start the meeting. Finally, PoortoRich finally announced the start of the meeting and took the lead in asking a question. "I would like to express my approval for the technology exchange between arms proposed by Wang Ling. This proposal is very good. Where is the Allied forces? We have agreed, but our differences on which arms to exchange are still a bit too big. Moreover, the Allied forces have a really big appetite, targeting our coalition Kirov airships and Apocalypse tanks. What do you think about this?" Wishful thinking. Whether it is the Kirov airship or the Apocalypse tank, they are our great weapons and must not be exchanged. Yes, that's right. The Allies are so ambitious that they took this opportunity to focus on our two great weapons and want to get them. They have been coveting these two types of arms for a long time, and they must not exchange them. Isn't it? We were able to fight against the Allies for so long, and even almost defeated them in the end. Kirov airships and Apocalypse tanks are indispensable and cannot be exchanged. If they are really exchanged, we will be completely different from the Allies. No more advantage. The Allies have too much appetite. These two major weapons are our foundation. Neither of them can be exchanged. In my opinion, it is better to select some units that are not too powerful and use them as inferiors. As soon as PoortoRich finished speaking, most of the generals began to deny it. These are diehards among the top leaders of the coalition forces. They had opposed the alliance before. Now that it involves the exchange of arms, they are of course even more sensitive and do not want to hand over any advanced arms technology. Although the coalition and allied forces unite with each other to fight against the Empire of the Soul, these generals are also very realistic. On this issue, what they consider is not the threat of the corresponding arms to the Empire of the Soul, but what the Allies will do to themselves after the exchange. What a threat it poses. After all, the battle for hegemony has been going on for so long. They cannot accept the Allies from the bottom of their hearts and must always be wary. Of course, the situation in the Allies was almost exactly the same as theirs. However, there are still some flexible generals who put forward different opinions at this time. Shoddy goods. We have been fighting with the Allies for so long. You still think that the Allies are fools and can't tell the difference between our arms and technology? Is it valuable? If we trade off inferior units, they can exchange some useless units for us. The proposal is a good one, but when implemented, both sides exchanged some units that have little effect on the subsequent war. So this proposal, aren't you going to be ruined? Yes, this is Wang Ling's hard work, and it can truly promote the alliance between the two armies. However, on this key issue, we each have our own agenda. So how practical is this alliance? We have to be wary of the allies. But the top priority now is to fight against the Seoul Empire. Everyone must be aware of the weirdness and ambition of the Seoul Empire, so don't delay big things for the sake of petty gains. Some radicals immediately retorted, then you mean that the military technology of the Kirov airship and the Apocalypse tank were just exchanged? The specific method of exchange and what will be exchanged have yet to be discussed. However, please don't forget that this is an equal exchange. The stronger the technology of the arms we take out, the stronger we can exchange it from the Allies. Really? Then do you think, among the Allied military technologies, which military unit is as valuable as the Kirov airship? If one type doesn't work, can't we ask for several more? On this kind of issue, even the Allies would not dare to act rogue. TCH, didn't you see how Wang Ling acted rogue against them before? The Allies would probably use the same method on us. This group of generals argued extremely fiercely over such an issue. The conflict between the two factions and the two ideas was extremely obvious. This is his own general, and the argument has already reached this point. You can imagine how fierce the argument was when all the generals of the two armies sat together to discuss the alliance. It is not an exaggeration to say that it was a large-scale quarrel. However, such an argument could not produce a specific result. Neither side was willing to give in. After arguing for a long time, PoortoRich suppressed his hand. After stopping the other generals, he looked at Wang Ling and asked, "Wang Ling, please don't remain silent. It was you who made the proposal. Please tell me what you think." The topic finally came to Wang Ling. At this time, Wang Ling could not watch any more. He coughed dryly and began to explain, "My generals, the exchange of military technology has advantages and disadvantages for us. Handing over our technology, giving it to the Allied forces will enhance their strength, but we will also get arms technology of equal value from them to enhance our strength, so we don't have to hold on to powerful arm technology, as we can't let go of our children to trap the wolf, right? Can't bear to let the child trap the wolf? This statement is somewhat interesting. Then your idea is to exchange the military technology of the Apocalypse tank and the Kirov airship, a radical general asked in a strange way. However, Wang Ling did not bow his head and smiled and replied, "General, this is the basis for the alliance between our two armies. We should not be too petty, otherwise it will not be conducive to the alliance. This exchange will definitely cost us some blood. However, we can't be too realistic and exchange all the military technology of Kirov airships and Apocalypse tanks. No matter which one of these two killer weapons, they are very powerful and valuable. Isn't it enough to pick one? Did the Allies digest it?